Hello, I'm David Little.
And I'm Jill Gittins. So welcome to podcast 4. This one is about Hahnemann, the Great Reformer. By the way, I'd just like to say that we are trying to keep our studio updated. This is our living room studio. So for today, we've moved in some of our favourite plants.
Fulia, psychosis.
And this one's a lady palm, so that's appropriate.
Does that mean I'm psychotic?
We've also acquired a beautiful new desk to put all our books and reference works and laptops on. So we'll try to keep updating this and making it more attractive for everybody. All right, now then. In this episode, we're going to really look at Hahnemann's work as a reformer in all aspects of the medical field. It seems that everything he looked at, he wanted to reform, and in a very holistic manner and in a very forward-looking manner. So first of all, here are my notes, we're going to have a look at the historical context that all this was happening in and go back to Hahnemann's life, his works and his writings. Samuel Hahnemann, he was born 1755 in Germany. He got his medical degree in 1779. And he took up work, he got married, he started a family. But after a very few years, in fact by 1783, he became so disillusioned with what he called the old school of medicine that he decided to give up the practice of what was then orthodox medicine. He felt he couldn't keep his Hippocratic oath, which says, do no harm. And he felt that he was doing harm if he gave the current mixtures of medicine that were being prescribed at the time. He felt that the effects of these medicines were unknown. It was dangerous to give people these things, especially in large quantities and in mixtures. So he renounced the old school of medicine and he began his lifelong search for a new approach to medicine. So what was he going to do? He was a trained doctor. How was he going to earn his living? So he decided to focus on the purely Hippocratic approach. He used psychology. He used simple single remedies, and he gave people advice on diet and lifestyle. Does that sound modern and holistic? Well, it is. He had to make a living since he didn't want to take too many patients and give them poisonous medicines. He became a translator. He was a great linguist. In fact, he knew fluently, I'll have to read this, there are so many, he knew, apart from his native German, he could speak fluently in English, French, Italian, Latin, ancient Greek, Arabic, Syrian, and Chaldaic, also some Hebrew. So obviously he was very talented as a linguist and earned money as a translator and translating mostly medical works. He also was one of the leading chemists of his day and very advanced in chemistry. And he did a lot of work on the chemical side, especially, for example, how to find out if goods, food, medicines and so forth were adulterated. He invented certain tests for that. So you can see that he is already trying to reform his own practice, to reform in a holistic way all the processes of healthcare.
During this period, Samuel made many system-wide reforms. During the period 1785 to 1789, he became temporary medical officer of Dresden. He was in charge of hospitals, prisons, workhouses, orphanages, and apothecaries. Based on his public health experience, he wrote Friend of Health, which was published in 2 parts in 1792 and 1795. It was obvious to him that many of the causes of disease that he was seeing on a day-to-day basis were caused by bad hygiene, unsanitary conditions, infectious epidemics, poor diet, and improper personal habits. And these were combined with problems like overcrowding in the cities and towns, pollution of the air and water, and contamination of food sources and unsanitary collection of waste.
It was quite interesting looking at Friends of Health again after some time while we were preparing for this episode. And I was really struck when I was reading it. He was still quite a young man, a young doctor, and he was given this responsibility of being the medical officer in charge of an important town like Dresden. And when you look at the things that he was in charge of, it sounds and was pretty grim. He was in charge of things like the hospitals, the prisons, the poorhouses, the orphanages, for example. And
Can you imagine being the establishment people taking care of a city with all their corruption, and having Samuel Hahnemann suddenly put in the position of being able to file ordinances that everyone had to follow, and he started inspecting prisons where he was against police brutality and capital punishment, and workhouses for the poor. He wanted them to be clean and give the people some chance of making a better life. Orphanages, apothecaries, he was really on the apothecaries for selling adulterated herbal combinations and other medicines, chemical medicines. So just imagine having Hahnemann walk in your door and say, "Hi, my name's Samuel Hahnemann, and you're going to clean up this mess."
So it's obvious from looking at this that he was very serious about cleaning up life. And you have to remember, he also had to deal with some very dangerous infectious epidemics. And when that happened, he was in charge. And his instructions to everybody, well, I hope they followed them because they were very, very sensible and important. Now, his instructions to medical people, Hahnemann knew, which was cutting edge at his time, that the infectious miasms were spread by contact, by droplets and airborne particles. He said there were, tiny invisible agents of infection that were spread by breathing the same air, by being too close to somebody,
Closed rooms.
by having closed rooms. He hated closed rooms and was very, very keen on fresh air. His advice to almost everybody is open the windows, let in the sunlight, let in the air, hang everything out in the air. So he used fresh air and sunlight was one of his major concerns. The quality of air, the subject that we're very concerned about today. So anyway, these are some of the things he was concerned about. He knew infectious miasms were spread by the contact droplets and airborne particles. So for this reason, he suggested very careful attention to the patient and the sick room. The founder recommended fresh air, sunlight, cleaning with soap and water, washing down rooms and using vinegar as a cleanser. He also called for boiling infected clothes and articles and using heat, sometimes ovens, sometimes glowing coals. He sterilized medical tools and suggested cleaning a mortar and pestles, for example, by washing them in warm water, then boiling them in water for half an hour, and if necessary, placing the articles on top of glowing coals. So when it came to hygiene, when it came to hygiene, when it came to public health, he had advice in Friends of Health for everybody, from mothers running their houses and bringing up their children, to doctors in the hospitals, to police in the prisons, and so forth. Mm-hmm. He wanted reforms in all of these areas. They're all humane. They're all holistic.
Remember that hygiene stands for more than hygiene like washing your hands. It means clean living, clean food, clean houses, clean streets, clean air, clean everything. So when we talk about hygiene as being prevention, it's clean living, clean thinking, clean doing, like that. So hygiene is a symbol of all those things. Hahnemann was very concerned about what he called actually diseases of civilization, as close as I can coin the term. The instinctive vital force evolved slowly over millions of years, but in the last 100 years, the so-called scientific revolution had exploited nature to such an unsustainable manner that it had placed the entire planet in danger. This constant stress and strain have increased to the point where the instinctive vital force is in constant fight or flight mode. The stress of life is so intense that psychological and physical breakdowns are increasing exponentially. In the first paragraph, in the introduction of the sixth organon, actually the fifth and sixth, Hahnemann wrote the following.
And now we're going to put up a slide showing his introduction of the organon. This one we call Diseases of Civilization. As long as humanity has existed, people have been exposed, individually or collectively, to illnesses from physical or moral causes. In the raw state of nature, few means of aid were needed, since the simple way of life admitted but few diseases. With civilization, however, the occasions for falling ill and the need for help against diseases grew in equal measure.
Hahnemann continues the statement by saying that since the time of Hippocrates, physicians have postulated a multitude of speculatory theories on the nature of disease and their treatment. Most of these medicines were palliatives, which either suspended or suppressed the disease state. This tendency towards human hubris has increased rather than declined. In ancient times, there was too little medicine, and now there was simply too much.
So, when we have a quick look at the situation that Hahnemann was dealing with around the 1800s in Germany, and then we look at modern times, we can see that although some things have improved, some things are actually much, much worse, and we're facing things that would have horrified Hahnemann, I think, if he could see it. For example, in his time, there was very poor hygiene and sanitation. Now, most of the people looking to this, I'm sure, have a flush toilet, running water, and so on and so forth. People then didn't, and that obviously made a lot of smelly, messy, and germ-ridden stuff lying around. Now, this has improved a lot. However, we've maybe gone to the other extreme. There's now a danger of excessive use of antiseptics, chemical cleaners. For example, how many things do you have in your home as cleaners? Dozens. And you find the same thing in cars, in workplaces, in public places. This is toxic stuff. It can damage the intestinal microbiome of the gut and weaken the immune system. And, for example, antiseptics and antibiotic use are causing bacteria to mutate into what the CDC director called nightmare bacteria.
So in Hahnemann's time, the unsanitary conditions led to many infectious epidemics. Today, the abuse of antibiotics and antiseptics are causing the infectious miasmas to mutate more quickly than nature can do alone. Now, there are infections caused by drug-resistant strains. Due to climate change, destruction of habitat, overpopulation, new zoonotic diseases like Ebola, coronavirus, now monkeypox, are crossing species lines from animals to human beings.
Now, in Hahnemann's time, there was a lot of poverty. A lot of people suffered from food shortages, a lack of nutrition. And again, most of the people watching this, I'm sure, have plenty to eat. But now there's a new set of problems, which is there might be better food security, but people are choosing the wrong things to eat. There's overeating. The standard Western diet promotes chronic disease and obesity. Our food production is based on factory farming and animal husbandry. And this is all tainted with chemicals, pesticides, hormones, antibiotics. This is a very big subject, so we'll fill in the blanks. GMO experiments are being carried out on populations without any sort of safety testing or knowledge of what they might do.
Remember, as Hippocrates said, let thy food be your medicine.
Another change that has happened since Hahnemann's time is that vastly more percentage of the human population lives in cities. And this has happened very, very rapidly. So, rapid urbanization, people are living in overcrowded conditions. They have unhealthy personal habits, a sedentary lifestyle. For example, children spend too much time playing video games instead of running around in the fresh air. There are many social problems at present, including such things as homelessness, drug abuse, gun violence, racial and class disparities.
When it comes to completing the cycle, you have to know what to do with your waste. Public sewage disposal has improved greatly, but the runoff from factory farming and animal husbandry is increasing. Better waste disposal, but the waste dumps contain toxins and non-biodegradable materials like plastics. Drinking water is cleaner, but now it has fluorides and bleach. Most waste dumps, trash incinerators, and industrial polluters are in lower income neighborhoods and kept away from the neighborhoods of the upper classes.
All right, then we continue with pollution, and we know how keen Hahnemann was on air quality and fresh air and sunlight and having no noxious fumes in the air that you breathe. Anyway, these days, what have we got? Many buildings are unhealthy. The roadways are crammed with traffic. There's air pollution from cars, trucks, and power plants causing a great increase in carbon emissions. There's rapid global warming and climate change. There is massive deforestation and loss of natural habitat.
Oh, Mother Nature.
And this has happened only in the last few decades. At the time of Hahnemann, the population was smaller. There was a great deal more natural land cover. Now it's shrinking and shrinking and shrinking every year. Okay, water shortages. Even in Hahnemann's time, getting fresh water was a problem. He was telling people to collect rainwater and put powdered charcoal in it. But we, in the present day, are facing massive water shortages and lack of clean drinking water, in fact. Then, what else have we got? What other nasty things can we add to this? This danger from nuclear emissions,
No.
spent waste, nuclear accidents. There have been at least 3 major ones in my lifetime. There's exposure to X-rays and radioactive materials, even in medical procedures. Then we have all of this stuff, exposure to X-ray, massive exposure to EMF radiation from power lines, radio waves, TVs, cell phones, computers, Wi-Fi, and other, quote, dirty electric fields. And this is all very new to human beings, and we really don't know the overall effect it's having on people.
Yeah, as I said before about the instinctive vital force in the human organism, being a creature that slowly evolved over millions of years, getting used to different climates, temperatures, food sources. But just since the Industrial Revolution, let alone in the last 100 years, things have sped up so fast with overpopulation and pollution and all the things we've been talking about, that the instinctive brain that we talked about before doesn't know what to do with it and goes into stress and fight and flight reaction and stays in that mode for long periods of time. At the same time, the so-called reason-gifted mind, you wonder how reason-gifted it is sometimes. Maybe it's more irrational than the vital force, in that, look what we've done. We've opened all these doors. We've opened Pandora's box. And all these things have come out of it, and we don't know how to put it back in the box. And nuclear waste, for 10,000 years or more, you got to keep it contained somewhere. Look at the last 10,000 years. Imagine how much change there'll be in the next 10,000 years. And we're going to keep those sites safe? Safe from what? Earthquakes, wars, tsunamis, Fukushima, Chernobyl, the old 3 Mile Island. And this is a new element. Imagine that. The vital force dealing with some new element. So I wish the reason-gifted mind would be more reasonable. And even when Hahnemann uses the word mind, what word is he actually using? I couldn't tell in the medicine of experience because I didn't have the German text. But I do have the German organ, so I could see that he was using the word Geist. Pure intelligence. It means pure intelligence. It means a bright and curious intellect capable of critical thinking. It's kind of different than the Gemut, which is your emotional disposition. So the reason gifted mind is given way to the lower mind, which you might call the greedy mind. And with financial gain being the major motive for our great industrial revolution, what has come to pass? It's unsustainable. They don't know how to close the circle. If you're going to think of something to do with anything, you have to think it through and know your closing game. So they open the box. Do they know about closing it? They're not even thinking about closing it. That's about all I can say on that without getting too carried away. Now that we talked about the problems, let's talk about homeopathic solutions. It has been said that homeopathy has no remedies for detoxification. For this reason, one needs detox programs with chelation remedies, herbs, vitamins, organ, bowel, and lymphatic cleansers, as well as elimination diets. They wish to eliminate, purge, and use catharsis to drain away the materia peccans. For this reason, one needs to buy several designer drugs and mixtures containing 10, 20, 30, or more medicinal substances. Whatever happened to Hippocrates, vitalism, simplicity, and moderation? Some naturopathic come pseudo-homeopaths say that maybe in Hahnemann's day, when conditions were simpler, you could use single remedies, but now things are so complicated you need to use detox remedy mixtures. Some opine that today, classical homeopathy no longer works. What do us Hahnemannian homeopaths have to say about that?
Since the beginning, Hahnemann and the first generation of homeopaths, they studied toxins, poisons, forensic medicine. They studied industrial pollution and food adulteration very closely. The homeopathic reference works contain a large amount of information on toxicology, and substances such as arsenicum were proven and integrated into the materia medica. That is why Hahnemann wrote his article, What are Medicines and What are Poisons? That was in 1806. Now, I'd like to recommend, this is Robin Murphy's Homeopathic Medical Repertory. I'll just read the first page here. I'll show you the book. The Homeopathic Medical Repertory by Robin Murphy, MD, a modern alphabetical repertory by the Hahnemann Academy of North America. Now, Murphy has an excellent chapter on toxicology, which contains many rubrics and a great collection of information on poisons and toxins. And David, I think you were involved in Robin Murphy's seminars back in 1991.
Yeah, actually, Robin invited me to come to his academy and teach the LM potencies and Paris methods. And actually, I brought the first LM1, 2, and 3 remedies to the USA. Before that, they were only available from, I think, Byron in unusual potencies. Step potencies weren't used. They were jumping from up to 18 and 24. I don't remember the numbers exactly. But Robin had actually tried them and found they just caused aggravations. And when I came and brought him the 0, 1, 2, and 3, it made it so he could do his own research, which he did very well. And over the next 2 years, they did a lot of studies. And actually in that class was Luc de Shepherd, MD, who was in that first seminar. And we discussed the sixth organon and talked together. And I knew I had met a really great homeopath.
Okay, now we're going to do a brief review of some really the most serious industrial pollutants and environmental toxins affecting us, ones that have long-lasting cycles in the soil, the water, and the air. And we're going to do, along with that, we're going to give you some of the major remedies.
Just a few examples.
We're going to start with arsenic. Arsenic was used as a pesticide against boll weevils in cotton plantations in the southern US states. Now this poison has impregnated the soil, polluting farm products, especially rice paddy. The levels of arsenicum are up to 5 times higher than they are in Europe or India or Bangladesh. An example of remedies for arsenicum poisoning includes arsenicum, carbo-veg, ferrum, hepasulf, ipecac, mercury, and phosphorus.
One of the biggest pollutants is fossil fuels, which contain carbon gas, carbon monoxide, which remedies like ammonia carb, carbo-veg, and opium can be effective with, and coal gas, ammonia carb, carbosulf, and opium. The sources include coal-fired power plants, petroleum refineries, petrol-based products such as plastics and synthetic fibers. These gases contribute to global warming. There's also sulfur dioxide in the environment, coming from coal plants, diesel motors, and volcanoes. They produce acid rain. Remedies for these are things like kelp, pulse, sulfur, and others.
Yes, there's also the issue of smoke in general.
Yeah,
all
from
kinds of
forest
burning.
fires and slash and burning farming. There's a lot of fires, actually. There's a lot of fires right now. I think California's on fire. Yosemite Park is on fire. The giant sequoias are threatened. This is all part of global warming.
So some of the remedies for that were euphrasia, ignatia, sepia, and spigalia. Now, one of the next big problems is lead.
And there's no safe level for lead. I just wanted to say that. Even the CDC is saying that there is no safe level. Yet it's found in water systems in many major U.S. cities like New York City, Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Washington, and probably a lot of small towns and villages.
A horrifying example is the Flint, Michigan scandal, which some of you might remember, which exposed inherent environmental, class, and racial disparities. Lead is used in water pipes and associated there with copper fittings, so there's sometimes lead and copper problems. Lead is found in the emissions from power plants and oil refineries. It was added to gasoline and paints for many years. It is still used in batteries and also spread through combustion of gunpowder and the manufacture of bullets. Some of the leading remedies are alumin, causticum, natrum sulf, sulfuric acid, etc.
Another pollutant that's present in the environment in large amounts is mercury. One source of mercury poisoning can be from amalgam fillings, which many people have. A major source of mercury emissions is mining, particularly gold mining, where it's associated with the destruction of the rainforest. And then it's used in metallurgy processes to produce things like aluminum, copper, lead, and zinc, which also aren't very good. Another source is coal combustion and oil refineries. It's found in the oceans, where it affects all seafood and even fish, which are normally healthy. And in fish, it's often associated with iron and other pollutants. The oceans are very polluted now, and seafood is contaminated. So there's a rather large rubric for mercury, because homeopaths had so much experience with mercury being used as a medicine. So they studied this one daily. So some of the strong remedies for mercury poisoning are aurum, carboveg, heper, latch, merc, natsulf, nitric acid, phytolacca, staphylos agria, and sulfur.
Now we come to iron, and iron poisoning can be associated with taking too many supplements, using iron pots and pans, being in the vicinity of iron smelting and steel production, and this metal can run off into rivers, lakes, and oceans. Some of the leading remedies for this are china, ferrum phos, pulsatilla, sulfur, and zinc.
Aluminum aerosols, it's in aerosol sprays, skin powders, and it can be absorbed through the skin. It's in food, water, medicines, used in dialysis, infusions, vaccinations, cookware, And of course, aluminum, bryonia, and plum bottom are examples of remedies for aluminum poisoning. And I want to say something about the remedies here. You'll notice that in some of these rubrics, some of the remedies are isopathic. And isopathy is a sub-science of homeopathy. Lutz actually did the most early work, although Hering was the first to suggest it. And even Hahnemann himself used isopathic nosodes at times. We have a case from the Paris casebook where he used isopath, but it was actually tuberculosis, wasn't it?
Yes, I believe it's from the patient's lungs.
Isonosode
Yes.
made from tuberculosis. And he wrote in his casebook, he called it isopath. So isopathic remedies can be useful, but one has to be careful with this, with heavy toxic loads, because if you give it too much, too frequency, and too large a doses, it can cause aggravations and problems. And one shouldn't get into the habit of thinking whatever they have will give the same remedy. First of all, it's not the same because it's potentized. But second of all, there are many remedies for mercury poisoning and lead poisoning. And if you take the totality of the symptoms and find one of the remedies in the greater rubrics that is individualized, then it can remove a manifold of problems, not just that one toxin, but maybe a chain reaction of toxins. So don't forget the constitutional remedies also detox people. You don't need remedies for each individual thing, especially for general detoxing. But when it comes to specific one-sided detoxing, sometimes you have to treat that layer first, or at least earlier. So I just wanted to share that little bit about isopathy. So there's other remedies for personal exposures like alcohol, caffeine products, tobacco, stimulants, recreational drugs, narcotic drugs, allopathic drugs, medical testing, x-ray, radiation, anesthesia, and of course, vaccinations.
I'd just like to mention briefly here that we have written on this subject in the Homeopathic Compendium in Volume 1, page 189. There is a background study of the various things that homeopathy does have remedies for. And on page 721 to 723, there's a study of radiation, which includes a study of 2 cases of radiation sickness that David treated.
An interesting case. One was medically induced and the other was caused by Chernobyl explosion. Well, I think we're up to closing.
Yes. So that's it for this podcast. Thank you all for listening. And I invite all of you to join us for the next podcast, where we will be continuing to discuss the subject of Hahnemann, the great reformer, and we'll continue the subject. If you like our work, please support our podcast channel. Please click subscribe and the notification icon to receive new podcasts and updates. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave your comments. They're much appreciated.
One last remark, as always. Today, Mother Earth, Gaia, is groaning under the weight of human waste. We must remember that already 99% of billions of species has already passed, and we're actually in the 6th great extinction now. So we've opened Pandora's box, and pollutants are just one of the things that have leaped out of it. But the last thing to come out of the box was hope. So we hope that everything goes well for one and all, and we hope for the sake of Mother Earth that everything goes well, and let's all get in there and do our parts. Thank you.
So be well, be safe, join us for the next podcast. Bye-bye.
And be happy.